All right, and our fearless leader here that brings all these people together for so many years, Rob LaMagna-Reiter, VP Chief Information Security Officer at WoodmenLife. Thank you so much, Rob. He's been such a huge supporter of FutureCon all over the central United States. We appreciate you a lot. Lorna Waggoner is Iowa HIMSS board and a mentor and a publishing author and another one of our panelists. Thank you. We have Rob Baldi is the Chief Compliance Officer at Bridges Trust and one of our panelists. Thank you so much. And last but not least, our moderator for today's panel, Marc Johnson, Director vCISO at Impact Advisors, and Marc is a big supporter of our events as well. Thank you so much. With that being said, I'm going to turn the panel discussion over. I'll lead it off with Marc. And everyone, let's welcome our panelists.
Am I on? Okay. Excellent. Great to have everybody here. I'm very grateful for my panelist colleagues, and want to dive into a couple different questions that we have, and then we'll take some questions from the crowd later on. So to start, cyber resilience was one of the themes that you kind of heard through some of the presentations, and we've had traditional disaster recovery, business continuity, but what does it mean to you and your organization when we talk about cyber resilience? Rob, you want to take the first one? Exactly.
Cyber resilience is the ability for us to conduct ongoing operations through the face of cyber adversity or service unavailability. So we define resilience as being able to provide services to all of our members, being able to provide services to our back office and associates. Even there could be service degradation, we want to be able to conduct ongoing operations, and then we tier that obviously with criticality. Not everything's created equal, right? So some services and applications and end-to-end processes have different recovery point or recovery time objectives. But I think what's more interesting is how do we actually deliver that, right? Because it means one thing, so how do we actually make good on that, right? So depending on where those apps are hosted, the data, and who's accessing it, could be a mixture of on-prem, hybrid, or cloud, and just how we're doing the different availability zones, the different regions, the total cost of ownership, and the likelihood that something's going to take that out. It all goes into the equations. We use a quantification platform to look at mean and tail risk and how likelihood. So tailored to your business, we look at a risk-based approach, and then we try to prioritize based on limited resources, because I don't think any of us in here have all the resources we would need. I'll hand it over to Rob 2.0.
2.0. Oh, the upgraded version. I will say, from my perspective, to dovetail into what you just said, Rob, in my previous career, I was a member of the military. I was a superintendent of United States Strategic Command, worked with U.S. Cybercom. In the day-to-day firefight of incident response, it's one of those things where traditional information security is an area where we're doing the block and tackling. You're looking at the confidentiality, integrity, and availability if we're going down the ISC squared CISP route, which nobody wants to. But when we talk about resilience in the day-to-day world where we live today, we're looking at things like Shadow HQ, and I'm not trying to throw a vendor and say this is the way you do this, but Shadow HQ is $5,000 to $10,000 a year. You have an entire AWS-based platform that has all the backup capabilities in the world, is an off-the-grid capability if your whole network goes down. If you have a compromise, if something happens on your network, if it's unavailable, if you don't trust the integrity of it, you switch to that platform. You have all of your critical users, all the people that are part of the BCP plan, all of your policies, all of your vendor contract lists, everything you need in that platform for the cyber resiliency piece. It's more than BCP. You need your playbook to get your business back in the game. If you don't have something like that, or your own off-the-grid thing, or fill-in-the-blank as your solution, I would highly encourage people to do that, because not enough people do. People in the CISO role are going to be the people they look to actually find out what happens in that moment. And when you don't have an answer and you're looking at a call tree, you're not going to be able to actually return the business to normal operations in an expedient manner.
Well, from my perspective, people don't create breaches because they don't understand firewalls or how encryption or AI works. They create them because they don't recognize what the threats are, or what to look for, or what to do about it when they find it. So I think this is the starting point. 80% of our workforce are frontline workers. And these frontline workers do not have typically technology skills or knowledge, but they do know your workflows, your company, your policies, and what the endpoint is. So in my mind, resiliency is not, I mean, if it gets to the IT department, you're already in trouble because they're in. So it's the outer perimeter that I really feel strongly that we need to be working on. And of all the people that I meet, that's the issue. The IT people, you guys know all those. You've been in the business 30 years. You know all the acronyms. But your frontline people that it's slipping past don't know all that stuff. And they don't want to know all that stuff. But they do need to know some stuff. I feel like that's the way to build the resiliency so that you can be proactive as opposed to reactive.
Excellent. So when you think about who owns what within a business resiliency program, you have the business, you have security, you have traditional IT. How do you get all three to work together to create that program?
Candy.
Candy?
Candy.
So Halloween is your best
Yeah. Or
bet.
coffee. But on a more serious note, in order to launch, scale, and mature our business continuity, disaster recovery, and overall resiliency program, resiliency didn't happen overnight because nobody understood what resiliency meant. So it started with some introduction, storytelling, and aligning that to the incentives of all the different business units and divisions. The business continuity function had to do that through a myriad of mechanisms, right? Because all of us, through our lived experiences, have a wide variety of different learning preferences. We process information differently, so they have to go out there and storytell, build relationships. And for me, that's bringing candy to people, dropping off coffee, taking folks out, having a conversation about what we're trying to solve for, identifying the mutual end state and backing towards that along with the company parameters. And so we collaborated together, but then had to prioritize how we engaged on that, right? But then we had drop dead requirements, obviously, backed into whether it was regulatory requirements, service availability for apps and services. And so it really just depends, but it really just came down to personalization. It sounds really simple and easy, but it's actually the most difficult component of it because you're having to explain a foreign concept in foreign language to folks that have a million things on their plates. And so it's just persistence, grit, explainability. And I would say the most important trait that we have is leading with the heart of a teacher, and that's how we built it.
Excellent.
I would say I've had more success. I like that idea. US Cybercom had a training cell that several members of the audience were part of in the 2005 era. And one of the things we learned is that gamification within cybersecurity is a game changer. Hands down, it's a game changer. People want to win, and there's a lot of competitive people in this room. And what we have found is that when you have a status quo or you have a baseline, then you want to elevate up and be better, and you gamify that, and I swear to God, $50 gift cards do amazing things. That can be the catalyst to getting your staff involved and getting it to the next level. So when we talk about this, I'll just use an example, and I'm not embarrassed to say this, and I know I'm not going to get sued for it. But several organizations I've worked at before, and you can look at where I've worked at on LinkedIn. If you look at like Equifax or American National Bank, or you fill in the organization I was a part of, When I went in day one, it was not where we were at when I left the company. And day one, my typical question for our cybersecurity tabletops or wargaming exercises was, all right, the network's breached, assumed breached, I don't care what scenario you use, what gets recovered first? And we all have a BCP plan. We always have BCP. We know what the DR plan is, we know what's supposed to happen, but do you? When push comes to shove, when politics are involved, when there's stress, when there's the chief operating officer and the CFO, and you've got different people saying, I need my systems back first, it's not how it really goes. That's not what happens. What happens is you have finite resources in IT and finite resources in cybersecurity, and you're trying to recover the network, and it's not how it goes. So you actually have brass tacks, and you have a 4-hour conversation on what gets recovered first. And then you go to the next round of that, and the next iteration, and you look at, okay, this was your KPI for the recovery time. What do we do the next time? And whoever gets the most improvement the next time around, that is where you have the catalyst for recognition of the people that do the hard work. And that's what you want. You want people to have skin in the game. You want people to have motivation. You want them to be passionate about their job. And even a $50 gift card per team member does a lot in addition to candy or coffee.
No doubt, incentivize people. I mean, the Hy-Vee grocery stores, a family, people-owned, employee-owned, and boy, those really do make a big difference. The other thing I feel is getting everybody around the table, getting the person from HR and the person from sales and your developers with the IT people and the CEOs. Because the IT person may say, well, we really need to get this done. And somebody from HR is going to say, oh, but that will affect this. And I don't think we're seeing that many times today in a lot of the breaches and the big dollar things that have been an issue. The thing I mentioned earlier about the Medicare thing, 90 of those people were doctors, healthcare providers. That's shameful. Surely the receptionists, the people in billing and coding saw that but were afraid to ask. And we need to open that. And those incentives, getting them on the team, getting them at the table, I think that's a big deal.
Well, I would dive just a little bit deeper to say the business has a responsibility to relay the information of priority without technology before we go to security, before we go to DR. If we don't do that, or if we in IT are forced to do a business impact analysis, it's flawed. I have done studies at United Airlines and so forth. When the business defines a function, and ironically IT has the same number of systems, when you analyze it, only 9 overlapped. So you know there's a big disconnect. The other thing is, like Lorna was saying, you can't do it in isolation. It can't be that this business unit says this and the next and the next and the next. No, you need to get them in a room. You don't need to have a cage match per se, but you have to get them to understand who is truly more crucial and critical than another, and get those workflows down, and then you map to the systems. So we need to be careful to align, but we also have to have a responsibility to what the true business workflow is. So let's move on. I know we've heard 1,000 things about AI today, so we'll skip over to quantum computing real quick. What do you think, or when do you believe quantum will realistically impact the way we encrypt today?
I'll take this one first. This is every board's question this year, so it's a relevant question for the panel. There is limited that we can do with quantum computing at this point in time. So if you go out to all the most prestigious vendors, I'm just going to pick on Microsoft as an example. Microsoft has plans in place for the 2027 timeline to have controls in place for quantum computing. The number one thing that I would encourage everyone to do, no matter what company you work for, is to identify your risk assessment of quantum computing. So everyone has sensitive data on certain systems. So you have to have, what are your critical systems? Where are they located? What platform are they on? If they're on a technology, if they're on a system that's on a server, obviously it's the normal block and tackle network architecture of keep them isolated. Probably not doing that. It's probably not going to happen based on how your network is set up. So the next thing you have to do is identify what platform it is on, when is the vendor going to support the technology that you need to do to implement that. Likely, it's not anytime soon. But even having the inventory in place, I don't care if you work in banking, if you work in finance, if you work in energy, if you work in DoD, it doesn't matter what industry, find out the regulatory requirements that you have to abide by. In my case, my company has to do SEC. So we have SEC regulatory requirements, and do we comply with our encryption and quantum computing stuff? No, of course not. The vendors don't even support it yet. So I have a risk assessment that is set up that lists all of our technologies, where our sensitive data lies, what platforms they are on, and when they are going to be compliant. And then we make sure to track that with the vendors and to make sure that they are publishing when they're going to have those things in place. And of course, then we're going to migrate to that technology when it becomes available. It's the limited things that we can do at this point in time. There are some more cutting edge things you could do, but I think it's futile because it's kind of like when you look at the older things where we have some vulnerability comes up in some Unix-based platform that's supporting the whole thing that's going to bring the whole thing down. You can try, but it's not going to make that big of an impact. You have to rely on the vendors for that and hold them accountable, or switch to vendors that will support those things.
Let's build on top of that a little bit, and I'll shift gears into something related, action that you could possibly take now and augment your strategy on holding your vendors accountable. But that's also taking a look at how you're doing certificate management and rolling out quantum-resistant certificates across your organization. So separately from the whole quantum risk, we're all aware that the timeline to issue certificates is shrinking over the next few years. If you're not already taking a hard look at how you're going to remove the manual process from those, standardize how certs are rolled out, standardize how they're being encrypted, those are some steps that you can take in that direction to help in parallel as you're holding your vendors accountable. So as Rod mentioned, there are probably a finite, limited number of things that are fully in our control in our vendor ecosystem, but there are certain avenues at which you can start making inroads to build the foundational infrastructure that'll help strengthen your vendor ecosystem once it's live and ready. And so those are some of the things that we are thinking about in addition to the vendor ecosystem, supply chain concerns, and just understanding how far down the rabbit hole does that go. And it's really quantum computing is really going to exacerbate a lot of the existing issues we have now, right? I mean, you start talking about the operational complexity with, technical debt and all those monolithic systems, and is your segmentation truly accurate? So it's going to really compound how you're doing your risk quantifications, your risk assessments, but try to piggyback on some existing efforts that you should be already thinking about.
Whoa. My expertise is healthcare and HIPAA compliance. And of course, HIPAA has been around since 1996, and we still have people who can't spell HIPAA. So how's that going to work for you? I feel that even the Department of Defense, Department of War, I hate it when they change the acronyms, they have put CMMC certification on hold for 60 days. And at the end of 60 days, which is about 45 days now, you're all still going to probably have to do it. And if you're not already doing most of it now, by now anyway, your businesses are vulnerable and in trouble. Even with HIPAA, they said that it would be in 2025 and 2026, and then they closed the government a couple of times. But this is not government. I mean, HIPAA got started with Clinton, and then HITECH Act came into effect when Bush was in office, and then Obama did 21st Century Care Act. And I mean, it's always going on. There's no reason to delay any of these things. Now HIPAA says that they're going to do it mid-2027. But hey, people are jumping all over this Rural Tech Catalyst Fund thing because they're giving you money. 8 states, including Nebraska, are taking advantage of this money because we've had 150 rural health plans close. That's a big problem for a state like Nebraska and Montana and all these rural communities. So we need to be behind this. You guys need to be behind this. And we appreciate all of the comments that have come up here. So we need to not ask why. We need to ask what else? What else?
So let's go ahead and move on to artificial intelligence, because we've not talked about it at all today. What would you think would be the best internal Gen AI policies, and which ones have failed?
So to repeat the question, what's the best policy and what are the policies that have failed?
Yes.
Okay. I have done AI briefings probably for the past 5 years, and every time I do it, I have to modify the briefing because of all of the changes across the industry. And that's just what's happened. If you look at the FS-ISAC communities, they are some of the best possible solutions to look to when you're developing an AI policy. And quite honestly, you can just Google FS-ISAC, like -FS for the financial services. They have one of the best ones, and for some reason, it's not locked down, and you can get it for free. Usually, you have to be a member, you have to log in, but for whatever reason, they made it available to everybody on the internet, which is awesome. So they had a team of lawyers put this thing together, and they update it quarterly, and it has some of the best leverage things you could possibly choose to do for your company. I just today had a board meeting, led the board meeting of my company, and we approved a new AI policy, and it's phenomenal, and I'm biased. But the policy does account for the fact that you have hallucinations of data. You have approved AI systems that my team and I have approved people to use that are locked down, and they have identity access management in place. It's based on permissioning, and it's based on technologies we have approved. And we have shadow IT, and I'm gonna say it, shadow AI. Nobody talks about it, but it's happening. I don't care what company you're with, I'm just gonna use Grammarly as the perfect example. People are using Grammarly in your companies, I swear to God. And if they're not, they're using it on their mobile phones, and then they're sending data through emails to themselves. So you need to account for the fact that they're using that. And you get around that through training, by the way. You have that in your policy, and policies aren't perfect. Policies are like the level here. Policies are like, we read and know the policies up here. You might have read all of your company policies, but I highly doubt that's true, because I know you haven't read all the EULAs. And if anybody read the EULAs, it's some of the people in this room. But with that said, it's a, hey, this is the policy, here's the training on the policy, don't use non-approved AI. That's one of my greatest things that keeps me up at night, is people entering data in the system we don't want them to use, whether that be Gemini or Claude or fill in the blank. Use your system that's set for your stuff and continue on that path, and make sure your people are doing the same. That way you don't have stuff that's going out and not an approved vendor. Make sure you're using approved vendors. Make sure that it doesn't say you can copy and paste the data directly into stuff. I have stuff, SEC regulatory requirements for Burgess Trust as an RIA and investment management company. We have the requirement to make sure that we don't put any customer data out there. We have stuff broken down through like high risk, middle risk, low risk type of thing. So low risk is like, okay, we're gonna put together some market commentary that's opinion based, it's not fact based. Critical things are things along the lines of, we're actually making investment decisions, we're helping our clients with their portfolios and asset allocations. We're not copying and pasting that. There's too much opportunity for hallucinations of data. We want validation checks on all the data, and we have it very clearly articulated in the policy. Monday is training with me based on teams to make sure they all know and they have questions, and that we also have checks and balances in place where Copilot or whatever system I'm using can give me validation on what they're using for it and validate them using it the right way so I can follow up and have touch points with them. But your policy has to be very clear on that. Otherwise, you're going to have users that are doing this stuff. I know a lot of people in this audience have seen the cartoon. I'm going to reference it. You've got the IDS, and you get firewalls, and you get antivirus, you get all the stuff in the corner, and all the cool stuff that most of us in this room use every day. And then you've got Dave. And Dave's in the other corner of the boxing ring, and Dave is going to get you jacked. Your entire company is going to be hacked because of Dave, because Dave's trying to take the easy way out. Don't let Dave win the boxing match.
To build on top of that again, it's phenomenal. This panel's doing a good job setting the foundation and allowing us to scale up. Beyond having central governance policies, we've tried to expand out to several working groups that are defined specifically to agentic AI or specifically to how folks are using it to try to fast track the updates that Rob was talking about, because we're finding ourselves needing to get those more quickly pushed to the organization and communicate them out. Publish internally developed training and educational courses weekly, monthly, so that we can maintain the up-to-date skills amongst the organization. One of the things that we've been moving quite rapidly to do is partnering with our AI team to take all of the policies and translate them into in-code guardrails as they're maintaining the internal systems. So some good examples on whether they're large or small language models that we use internally, whether they're the prompts or skills files that are seeded out to guard agents, making sure that those are updated on a routine basis to try to put as much policy into code, so infrastructure is code, policy is code, same principle within AI, so that our employees or associates have less opportunity to attain the right level of visibility, not because we're worried about prompt injection and poisoning as much as everybody was talking about years ago, but right now, understanding when agents or harness engineering agents, where you have teams of agents working on projects internally, are making decisions and how they're thinking from prompt and guardrailed by your access control and your personas, and guardrailed by your skills files and your MCP servers, and guardrailed by what API connections they can make. But you can give them 100 tasks and they'll come up with 100 different ways to execute that, right? So we need to understand how the agents and the AI systems are interpreting and outputting, so that we can make better policy decisions to refine those guardrails. That's one of the things that we're trying to get much better about. I don't have a solid good answer on it yet. I'll have to let everybody know once we've figured out the most least friction but business enablement way, right? There's a myriad of ways you can accomplish that, but we haven't centered on one quite yet. So we're doing a lot of manual on the systems themselves to enrich that policy. But that's how we're trying to take policy updates, apply it into the systems, help it scale up as fast as the updates are coming down. But we're finding it's much more time consuming than any other policy updates that we've had to undergo previously. But that's also the exciting thing, that the market is maturing also at a very rapid clip, both from the providers and the third parties. So solving the problem is getting a little bit easier.
Spoiler alert, your policies will never be done, because the regulations, the rules are not changing. The world is changing. The risks keep changing. So you will never sit back in your chair and say, well, we got those policies done, because some hacker's going to have some cool thing, or some developer's going to develop something and put it in and not have the guardrails up. So you have to be on it all the time. And checking your policies and reviewing them once a year, it's just not going to cut it. You need to have a committee that's looking at them a lot more often than that, depending on your industry and your organization and your data and your risks and your vulnerabilities, and how well your employees are trained, and how well your vendors are, supply chain are working, and if they've done their job. So we have to have policies, but you have to always be working on it. I used to think, oh, well, I'll be hippieing all the time because there's always going to be new people to train. And there will be. I mean, a lot of you have talked about your age and you've been here in the industry 30 years, but a lot of people haven't. And you're moving from one industry to another, and the regulations in those industries are different. So you're never going to get to rest on your laurels. You're just going to, and don't retire. There's nothing to do there. Just keep working on this. Be mentors.
Okay. One quick follow-up to that. That's a really good point. 2 months ago, I started an AI subcommittee. So every month we meet every month, and the policy gets updated every month. Every month. And you know what's kind of funny is the state of South Dakota and the SEC. If you answer the question on our compliance audits that you don't use artificial intelligence, you automatically get a demerit. They know that you are lying because Google in itself, when you're Googling something, now it has Gemini baked into it. So if you answer that you don't use it, you automatically get a demerit. So you have to adapt no matter what, because if you answer that you don't use it, they know you're lying, which is fascinating.
This spurred another side tangent thought. So a lot of your organizations over the next 6, 12, 18 months are going to be faced with a increasing amount of pressure from a cost perspective, right? I mean, it's starting right now as unpredictable token usage. It's going to sprawl depending on the number of AI capabilities that you consume. And so the answer a lot of companies are considering are open weight models versus the frontier models, right? Or different permeations or variations of that. And how this ties into policy is quite intriguing because a lot of us up here have already adopted the monthly or the biweekly or the several subcommittees or the different working groups to publish policy updates. But you have to start thinking even more outside the box when you start going down the open weight models, because when you start working, if you're using Copilot, right, and Copilot's choosing from the model you're using, or if you're using something direct from Anthropic or OpenAI or, God forbid, Meta, believe it or not, there are some pre-canned guardrails in those, right? They've done some sanitization on the type of outputs. None of that exists. All those safeguards are out the window in some of the open weight models. So then you have to rethink, are the cost savings worth it? What kind of policy enrichments do I need? What kind of guardrails do I need to bake in if I'm going to procure an open weight model? So things really do change depending on not just the provider, but the type of model, where you're sourcing it from, where you're running it. And your policy governance needs to be as real time as possible. And I know that sounds daunting, but it just takes a little bit of practice. It just takes exercising some new muscles and some more communication. So just be open-minded. You're not going to have all the answers when you start talking about guiding all the models, how it's being integrated, whether it's SaaS, PaaS, direct from an AI provider. Just take it one step at a time. Try to enrich yourself with as much knowledge as possible and bring it back. So it can be pretty daunting, but it's possible to get up to speed.
Probably not appropriate, but I am going to just give a plug quickly to UNL's AI courses that they offer, and I know it's the conference, but I did one of their 5-week courses over the past 5 weeks, and it's game-changing. Like, I've been using AI since it started, and like the courses that they offer are truly game-changing on how to actually leverage and implement this in your companies, and it's not that hard. If you've never checked out their stuff, and there's free stuff on the YouTube, there's free stuff on MIT, there's free stuff in a lot of places. If you've not done it, something to consider getting checked into, and it's a negligible cost. Like, we're talking $1,000 or less.
My husband's working on that right now.
Excellent. So I will pivot for a moment and ask for a straw poll. How many of you believe that your CEO, your CFO, your COO, your board of directors understand cyber risk? Show of hands. How many think they actually understand it? Okay. That's more than I thought.
The rest don't.
So let me ask panelists, how do we as leaders in information security get our peers to understand what the cyber risk really is? And how do we make sure that we can tie it to revenue, continuity, mission, et cetera?
Thank you. I think this one works better. I think the problem is acronyms. I am not kidding. Do you know that we don't have UFOs anymore? We have UAPs, unidentified
Aerial
flying
phenomenon.
aerial phenomenon. Who thought of that? That's crazy. I mean, my 90-year-old grandparents are going to be teaching their great-grandchildren about UFOs. They won't know what that is because they'll be doing UAPs. It is going to take 100 years for that to get figured out. And that is the problem. I mean, when we talk about SOC, we've heard about SOC. SOC is Security Operations Center, which means it's like a third party, somebody that does your stuff, right? SOC 2 is System Organization Controls, which has nothing to do with that. That is a regulation like HIPAA or NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. We have got to quit using acronyms when we are explaining things to people that are not technical. Here's an article I heard the other day. CISA's new SBOM rules face old adoption problem. Who dropped the SBOM? I mean, what's with that? SBOM stands for Software Bill of Materials, SOB. That's like the Project Management Institute has the PMBOK. So it's the same concept, but it's different. Stop using acronyms when you're explaining things to people. I mean, I had one, how many of you are interested, are prepared if your MIL stops on site today? Raise your hand, how many? Oh, you want to know what an MIL is? Mother-in-law, okay? So I'm just saying, acronyms are a problem. You throw in an acronym, you got a question. That's my 2 cents.
I could agree more. I remember my last company, I was having a conversation and I used the term DNS and the CEO was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, you're right. This is not the right term to use with you. He asked what happened. I'm like, there was a DNS server configuration. We get it fixed. He's like, what is that? I'm like, okay, got it. So to your point, analogies are great. Most of my analogies now, my current CEO is a car guy, so everything goes back to a car. Everything goes back to NASCAR or Winston or Indy 500. Everything. Everything goes back. Like, you know how the pit crew has to be super efficient to change the tires? And it's like, right, we need resources in the pit because right now the pit crew has like 4 people. So we need more pit crew members to actually be able to service the car. So everything goes back to acronyms and not using them. Like, really, we know them. Nobody else does. They need brass tacks and they need analogies. They need to understand what's actually happening. It's not just acronyms, obviously. It's making this tangible and making sure that you tie it to their personal lives. I would say I've had more success in my career when we're talking about this specific topic, when we're talking about personal lives. If you can tie it to their parents, their kids, their family members, that's where cybersecurity intersects with personal lives. You can get a lot of buy-in if you can tie it into, okay, listen, I know you don't want to use a password manager. Nobody does. I mean, I do, but nobody else does, right? But you walk them through the scenario of like their mom and what happened, or if an account gets taken over, what happens to it, and you get them to use it in their personal life, and then magically they want to use it at work from then on out, right? So you have to tie it into their personal lives and show them the use case to get them bought in to this sort of thing.
Rob's not telling the full truth. He doesn't like password managers. He likes passwordless and passkeys instead.
Several of them.
Yes. Anyways, this actually takes us full circle a little bit. Remember how one of my answers earlier was candy and coffee? Well, that was all intended to double down on the intent to get to know someone, break down their walls, build a relationship. Rob's spot on with personalization. Lorna's spot on with get rid of the acronyms. If you do both of those together and you get to know someone, That's why this takes so much time initially when you're getting started, right? You can be a genius, but sometimes being a genius, it can be difficult to get to the point where somebody just inherently trusts you and is willing to open up about, struggle in their life, something that's going on, and then you just click. Which is why, the number one answer is build relationships. Well, build relationships sounds easy, but again, everybody is different. You're not going to jive with everybody. You might try to go take somebody out to coffee or lunch or stop by their desk, and they're having a day. You are not building a relationship on that day, right? So be patient, be understanding, positive grit. Make sure you are focused. Always be intentional, always be positive. Round that out. That's how you get folks to care about information security, the risk, the shared wins, because then you can take all that information, hone your message, take everything this phenomenal panel said, and go execute. And you know what? Yeah, it can be frustrating, but you know what? It's rewarding at the same time. Nobody in here signs up to go do something difficult, but you know what the moments we're most proud of? We're most proud of the ones where we've had an uphill battle, where we've overcome and we've learned a lot and we've grown. And that's how you teach and train how to manage cyber risk without even using the word cyber risk.
So I'll dive a little deeper into that to say, how much more powerful is it for you to quantify a risk in dollars and cents versus qualifying it high, medium, low?
It's a good question. It is one of those things where management does want that. If you want to get buy-in for more resources, if you need a specific tool, there needs to be the risk assessment is going to tie into that, and that's what regulators want to see too. But you actually have to have a cost justification, because if we are going to spend $1 million and we're only going to get fined X, then why bother with PCI compliance? Like, there's no point. I mean, yes, you're supposed to, but if the fine's going to be so little, as an example of Walmart in Maine as an example, and it's not IT related, but it works. I did my MBA at Bellevue. One of the first cases I did was Walmart. Walmart uses teen labor in Maine, and they can't work teens more than 20 hours a week. And if they do, they get fined. Well, what do? They kept using teen labor, and they didn't care about the fine, and they didn't even bother having the state find it. They just self-reported, and they didn't care, because it was cheaper to use teenage labor than to hire full-time employees with benefits. They just didn't care. It wasn't worth it. There was no reason to put a solution in place. That applies to IT as well. Like, you can't just say, I want to go buy these tools, mischief managed, and you have everything squared away. I would love to have all the tools. The only place I've had at my disposal to buy all the tools was Equifax post-breach. They said, you have an unlimited budget and you have 700 employees, go. It's like, okay, great, swipe the credit card, let's go. We had 2 different security operations center solutions. We had ridiculous numbers of people. Post-breach, you don't get it. Before a breach, you have no resources, and I know that you all know this. So you do have to quantify, and you do have to provide justification for getting those solutions in place. If you don't, chances are you're not going to get your CFO's buy-in. You're going to be able to use scare tactics a little bit. You're going to be saying, oh, look at quantum computing, and unless we buy these things, and we can't do it. And maybe they buy that once or twice or maybe 3 times, but eventually you're crying wolf. It doesn't last forever, and it's not going to work long term. So I think it's really important that you do that, and I understand that it's also a pain in the butt. It is. It's a lot of work to go through and justify the use of why we need more budget, why we need more people, and you sure as hell better be able to actually follow through with that budget and hold your vendors accountable and not have the annual scope creep and have people, I won't mention the names, but you all know the names. There are certain vendors that have turned things on their head, and they charge like 300% more the following year after you onboard them. And you have a plan to exit those vendors as well. So you're going to be caught in the crosshairs if your vendor doesn't actually follow through with a 4 or 5% increase year over year versus a 200 to 300%.
My 2 recommendations are, you can go 2 paths, right? If you have the ability to implement and procure a cyber risk quantification platform, that does simplify things a little bit, gives you some more data, but if you don't, you can still go down the path of generating those You can go down the path of generating those ranges, right? The mean, the tail, average, likelihood, all those fun things that you tested for on the CISP or Security Plus or school, and that you've kind of filed away in the back of your head, right? But I think one of the most important things too to call out, not just the quantifying the cyber risk and the likelihood, is making the recommendation on what to do with it, right? Sometimes you're going to accept it, sometimes you're going to transfer it. If you truly feel like you need a solution, then it's on us to create what we call at Woodman our benefits realization management process, where we're showing, well, great, we know we have this risk we think is outside of our tolerance. Here's the proposal to solve the overwhelming problem, and here are the benefits that we're going to receive from solving this problem. Here's how they're going to benefit either cost avoidance, risk reduction, acceleration in business velocity, revenue. I mean, you pick your data points to offset the cost for said platform, and you be realistic about what that timeline looks like. I mean, there's 3 rules that I usually go into any of these analysis, right? It's going to take twice as long as you anticipate. It's going to cost twice as much in TCO that you think, and you're not the exception. So if somebody promises you the world and that it's going to be no big deal, they're lying and you should move on. So just being realistic and pragmatic about solving that problem, and then just explaining the business case, being transparent with your numbers, your capacity, your resources, and how that is offsetting the risk. Sure, it can be a little easier if you're an organization that's got a mature risk function, right? That's comfortable talking about risk, and you have teams of actuaries that all they do is talk about risks and outcomes. For those that are in less regulated, less risk-aware environments, it just goes back to the education and showing up some of the concepts in education, but showing both the quantification, likelihood, ranges, and being realistic about how you're going to solve that. You're never going to get everything you want. It's just all about finding that happy, pragmatic medium.
That's the beauty of getting everybody around the table, the frontline staff, with the CEO, with the board, with the IT people, that they're all communicating without acronyms, because they're all working towards a common goal. Because it's not just about getting a piece of technology for this one thing. It's about the big picture. You know, if this happened not too long ago, if my bank doesn't have $3,500 that I put in there, and it turned out to be that I had gotten, somebody had written a check on my account somehow, I don't know, that'll work. But I did get my $3,600 back, but I didn't get interest on it. But I did get that money back. But if it's healthcare and people's lives are at stake, that's a very high level of risk, a much higher level of risk. This is a matter of national security, our utilities, our water supply, our military, our healthcare. This is all for one and one for all. We really need to be a full cohesive team. I'm kind of passionate about this stuff, sorry.
We can tell.
Excellent. So I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions from the crowd. Please wait for the microphone to come to you. I think we have one over here.
So I'm going to preface this by saying it's totally hypothetical and not what I experienced in my current or previous employers. But during tabletops, it seems that everybody looks to security for the answers. During BIAs for BCPs, sorry for the acronyms, they want to downgrade the criticality of their systems to avoid work. So how do we get leadership to actually own things instead of seeing security as a checkbox and a scapegoat?
We didn't quite hear that.
We'll let him answer.
Oh.
The question was, during a tabletop or a BCP test, everybody's looking to security to solve all the problems. Nobody wants to take ownership because all of a sudden they're downgrading the prioritization of their applications and services, and the executives are like, hey, hold my beer, that's not mine. Right? Accurate? Good. That was the TLDR. Okay. So in those situations, one would argue that, business continuity and incident response is arguably not operating as intended, right? And I would question why. I would question, is there a disconnect between what we're trying to achieve and the understanding that all of our stakeholders have? Not knowing the organizational structure, but building peer support, ground root support through those conversations we were talking about, building that education, but then also looking a bit upward in the org structure where information security is, and just in understanding where in the business priority list does the ability to resume operations from some sort of disaster, not even cyber, right? Because business continuity is so much bigger than information security. Where does disaster recovery and being able to resume operations from a whole host of issues happen, right? Obtaining insight for where the real support and prioritization is, and then fanning that out, right? As a team that's responsible for business continuity, you sometimes cannot force something through in which there is little to no executive support, and sometimes you have to turn to the risk register and understanding that folks know what they're accepting by taking no action. But I would still pursue building rapport understanding with several stakeholders, even without executive sponsorship, to ensure the basics are met. Controlling my domain, controlling the controllables, working on education, working on that cross-functional problem identification and agreement, building consensus that something needs to be done about it, and you want to bring the stakeholders together and you're soliciting feedback and then beginning to chip away at it. I mean, that's just some of my little initial word vomit.
I would say that if you look across most companies, and it doesn't matter if it's Fortune 100 or if it's the smallest company that doesn't have a board and you're a small business, they probably don't apply. But generally, there's an incident commander. Like that's just what it is. And usually it's in the C-suite, and usually it's the CISO. So like we're the scapegoat. So we become the incident commander. Generally, we've gotten to a position where we're comfortable doing that. And it's one of those things where calm under pressure, we have an execution plan, we're planners, we plan it, we have tabletops, we get comfortable with it. And generally that's what happens during an actual event is everyone looks to us. And is it fair? No. But at no point in any other policy doctrine or any policy that you have outside of the CEO or the head of the company, it's generally us. Generally, we have the most knowledge. Is that fair? No. I think there should be, ideally, a business continuity plan where it has the chief operating officer or other people listed in their roles and responsibilities. But when push comes to shove, those people are really good at their jobs, but they aren't good at managing the chaos. And the incident commander lane that the CISO fulfills is that role. And furthermore, we're also 24/7, all the time. Like we know, right? We're always 24/7. We're always the people that have our phone on us, we answer the phone. The last several events I worked were things that were not during the day. It was at nighttime, it was on the weekends, and we all planned for it. So generally, that's why we're in this seat. That's why we're responsible for it. And it doesn't make sense to your question. It doesn't make sense that we would be. I would say I'm not the most capable to execute the operation of the business. And I don't need to. I just need to know who is listed on those roles and to call those people out. And especially if you take down the network, like I mentioned before, and we're on a tertiary platform that's not the business network, who's running that? I am. I'm running that network. So I need to be the one that's setting up the channels, the chats, the phones, everything else, and making sure that it's good to go. And they're all calling me and my cell phone. And I can't talk to 14 people at the same point in time, but they're looking to us. So that's why we're kind of the scapegoat. And I'm an only child, and I kind of like it, so I like being in charge. So, I mean, some people don't, but I think we're pretty good at it.
Well, what he said, and then if push comes to shove, if people refuse to do and are reporting that they are doing those things, there are whistleblower laws and False Claims Act. And I went to the Air Force Base the other day for the air show, and they announced that they are an Air Force base, and if we see something, we need to say something. And I believe that.
So I would say very similar things to what everybody said, but I would make a very stern statement to say hold people accountable. They are accountable to have their own business continuity plan. They are accountable to having done all that long-term thinking instead of short-term hair on fire. And so we need to hold them accountable to have those plans. Where are they? Who is that commander that's doing PR? Who's the commander doing communications? Who's the commander doing the legal? Those are not the responsibility of the incident commander. Not at all. So we have time for one more question.
Anyone?
Bueller?
Okay, I guess they're ready for prizes.
Well, thanks, everybody. We appreciate you staying here and listening to us. There are a few of the vendors that have decided to pull together a happy hour afterwards at Houston's Lounge. It's about a mile from here, so come up and ask me for the address, and I'll give that to you.